March 15, 1944, minus 15,000 feet above the quiet fields of England. Captain Francis Gabreski eased his hand forward, pushing the throttle of his brand-new P-47 Thunderbolt to its limits.
8.
The aircraft's latest marvel, a revolutionary water injection system, promised to turn his already powerful machine into an unstoppable force. "Door it!" With a flip of a switch, the engine should have surged from 2,000 to 2,500 horsepower. Instead, it choked. The mighty radial engine shuddered, sputtered, and began to lose power. Down below, German fighters broke away untouched, diving toward safety while Gabreski's plane coughed and strained just to stay airborne. He wasn't alone. Across air bases all over England, the same disaster was unfolding. The miracle technology that was meant to give American pilots the edge was crippling their aircraft mid-battle. Engines overheated, cylinders cracked, manifold pressures plummeted, and pilots were dying. Experts were certain of one thing: you couldn't T-push an air-cooled engine past its limits without destroying it. Thermodynamics, metallurgy, and physics all said the same. More power meant certain failure. But hundreds of miles away in a small lab in Connecticut, a young engineer named Frank Walker stared at test data that refused to obey those laws. Something about the alcohol mixture used in the injection system didn't add up. The formula designed to stop detonation was, in fact, causing it. His findings suggested an impossible alternative, a new chemical mix that could unlock 40% more power safely. The establishment dismissed it as fantasy. Walker called it science. When Gabreski first felt his Thunderbolt tremble above Cambridge that morning, everything had seemed normal. The sky was clear, his instruments steady, and the 12-ship formation of P-47s moved in unison, their massive R-2800 double Wasp engines humming at 2,700 RPM. Then radar reports came through, enemy aircraft, Messerschmitt Bf-19s climbing out of France. The Germans had altitude, agility, and lighter frames. But Gabreski had something new, a secret weapon the Luftwaffe had never encountered. He flicked the small toggle beside his throttle, activating the anti-detonation injection system. Inside a pressurized tank behind his seat, 15 gallons of isopropyl alcohol and distilled water waited to flood the supercharger, cooling the charge and allowing for higher boost. In theory, it was perfect. In practice, it was a disaster. The manifold pressure gauge twitched, hesitated, and began to fall. The deep roar of the supercharger turned ragged, uneven. Temperature needles crept into the red. The aircraft trembled under him, not with power, but with pain. Across the formation, others were suffering the same fate. Lieutenant Bob Johnson's fighter faltered, his gestures frantic as he pointed to his instrument panel. All across the squadron, engines were misfiring, sputtering, and losing thrust. The Germans saw the weakness instantly. The Messerschmitts dove in, their Daimler-Benz engines singing in perfect rhythm as they tore through the crippled American formation. The edge had flipped. U.S. fighters that were supposed to outrun their foes were now barely staying aloft. When the fight ended 12 minutes later, the Luftwaffe had vanished untouched. 3 Thunderbolts limped home. Gabreski's was among them, coughing, vibrating, and fighting just to stay alive. On the ground, mechanics opened the cowlings, and what they saw was catastrophic. Cylinder 14 was shattered, spark plugs melted, and the piston head cracked under detonation so violent it left metal scars deep in the block. This wasn't random failure. It was systemic destruction. By nightfall, reports flooded in from airfields across Britain. The same symptoms, the same chaos. Within 24 hours, nearly 200 of America's most advanced fighters were grounded. 5 days later, at Wright-Patterson Airfield in Ohio, an emergency meeting convened. Every major figure in U.S. fighter engineering filled the room: officers, scientists, and executives from Republic, Pratt & Whitney, and Wright Aeronautical. Colonel Benjamin Chidlaw presided over the crisis. To his right sat Dr. Samuel Herron, one of the world's leading combustion theorists, the man whose equations had shaped 2 decades of engine design. His conclusion was absolute. You can't cheat physics. The R-2800 is already operating at its limit. Any more power, and it destroys itself. He laid out the math. 18 cylinders, 2,000 horsepower, 500 degrees Fahrenheit, head temperatures, 6.65 to 1 compression ratio. Push harder, and the controlled flame inside the cylinder turns into uncontrolled explosion detonation. The engineers nodded. The water injection experiment was over. The P-47 would fly with reduced power, slower but safe. Frank Walker sat silently in the corner, clutching his notes, calculations no one wanted to see. His lab tests showed that methanol and ethanol, not isopropyl alcohol, could withstand the brutal pressures of combustion. The numbers said it could work. But the meeting adjourned with one conclusion: the war doesn't wait for theories. Still, Walker couldn't let it go. 2 weeks later, at RAF Steeple Morden, another engineer, Bill Kloss, arrived with Walker's data tucked in his bag. The official orders were clear: stop all water injection experiments. But Kloss wasn't there to stop anything. Together with Master Sergeant Mike Quirk, he inspected Gabreski's damaged engine. The evidence matched Walker's theory perfectly: detonation caused by the breakdown of isopropyl alcohol under high heat. Kloss proposed a quiet rebellion: test Walker's formula in secret. They drained the tanks and replaced the fuel with methanol mixed 50/50ths with water, sourced from a local chemical shop. Gabreski, ever the risk-taker, volunteered his plane against all regulations. The test run began cautiously. The engine fired up smoothly, its deep growl, stable, powerful. As Quirk adjusted the fuel flow and Kloss watched the instruments, manifold pressure climbed 52 inches, 58, 65. No coughing, no heat spikes, no detonation. Then Gabreski pushed it to full emergency power, 68 inches of mercury, 2,800 RPM. The Thunderbolt roared. The vibrations vanished. Supercharger whined in perfect harmony. Cylinder temperatures stayed cool. The double wasp didn't just hold together, it thrived. Impossible had happened. By changing chemistry, not mechanics, they had broken through the absolute limits of physics. Walker's so-called suicide formula had given the P-47 2,800 horsepower, and with it, the ability to chase down the Luftwaffe's best. The miracle was real after all. It just needed the right kind of courage to believe in it.